Welcome back to the Women in Movement podcast. We're here with Alicia Gerstein. Alicia is a performer, a practitioner, and an instructor in New York City. She does stilts, pole, puppet, and so much more. I'll give Alicia a moment to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Alicia. It's true. I do all of those things. I'm a pole dancer. I'm a dancer off the pole, artist, and instructor, and puppeteer. Yeah.
Welcome. We're so excited to have you here. So you have been polling for a very long time, since 2015, right?
Yeah.
And how long have you been working with stilts?
Much longer than that. I kind of did it on and off as part of the puppetry world, starting when I was a kid. And then I got kind of bored of it, and then I saw people doing things that I thought were more exciting, and I wanted to use stilts again. I grew up volunteering at Bread and Puppet Theater in Vermont in the summers, and pretty much all the kids there, at least at that time, learned how to walk on stilts.
Wow.
And stilts were a big part of parading and puppet circuses, so usually there would be like a couple acts in the show that had kids on stilts. So some of us weren't very good at it, but we were in a big group and we were encouraged to do it. And so that's how I first learned.
That's so cool. How old were you?
I was 10.
Wow. Yeah. So you've been walking on stilts since you were 10.
Yeah. But I mean, I was really just walking at that point. And then we would, get better at it and be dancing and everything. Then I started working with a much broader view of what was possible on stilts. In 2005, somebody came to the theater from Colombia and showed videos of what his company there was doing, and they were going upside down and picking each other up and getting up and down from the ground. And I was like, what? I've been doing this since I was 10 and I didn't know you could do that. I have to learn this. And so that became my goal. And then I went and I ended up working with Nemcatacoa Teatro in Colombia.
Wow. How long were you there?
I was there on and off for over a pretty long period of time. Like I went there for the first time in, I think, December of 2006. And then I didn't go back for a few years. And then I ended up working on this kind of ongoing project for a few years where I was going there every year for a little bit. Eventually, like after that, went back and worked on different festivals or helping make different shows with that company over, I haven't been back there since January of 2020.
Wow.
Yeah, but on and off.
What was like one of the biggest challenges when you were there trying to learn?
The biggest challenge for me, which at the beginning was so frustrating that, it was just incredibly frustrating, was the stilts themselves were different than the ones I had been using for my whole life. And if there are any stilt walkers, this would make sense to them if they're listening to this. But I learned with it was just tied on, and there wasn't a foot plate, so your foot is tied onto the stilt, but it's kind of pointing and flexing a little bit, and that's where your balance comes from. And then I learned on wooden stilts, and then the stilts that we were using with Nemcatacoa were metal stilts, so not only were they much heavier, because back in those days they were made out of steel. Now we have them made out of aluminum, which is a lot lighter, but they were a fixed foot position because your shoe was bolted onto a foot plate, so there was no flexion of your ankle, and that was like crazy for me. Like my brain could not figure out what to do. Yeah. And I felt like I had no stability, so that was like a really rough learning curve, and I felt like I couldn't do anything when I had been like pretty good before. So like the first year that I was adjusting to that was hard. But now I would always recommend that people do that.
You like those ones? Those better? Okay.
Oh, absolutely. It gives you so many more possibilities. Like when I teach, I pretty much require that people use that type of stilts.
Wow, that's so. I didn't even know there were two different. I'm sure there's a multitude of types. That's so cool. And what did you most enjoy about your time there?
I mean, it just spent such a long time, but I guess like the thing that is, I think one of the things that I appreciate the most about Colombia, specifically Bogota, where I was, the capital, is that there's a very rich culture of outdoor performance and street theater, and there's like professional level street theater. It's taken seriously. There are grants and festivals just for street theater, which is not something that exists in this country. And I'm coming from a background of doing a lot of outdoor performance, but in limited ways, both because of climate and because of actual laws in New York City that make it illegal to do outdoor cultural stuff.
Yes.
If you're going to have a lot of people and make a lot of noise. It was incredible. And there were just like so many groups and so many things happening. And now there's a parade over here and now there's a show over here. And because of the climate, that can happen year round. So I think just seeing like the richness of theater and outdoor art there was really wonderful. And like participating in that was also really great.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to share culture and really like bring community in, for sure. I will say that New York City is cool for the fact that people are always outside doing something, sharing something, or moving in different ways. That's cool, but yeah, you're right. There are restrictions as far as permits and sound permits and street permits and park permits that really hold back that ability to just have these wonderful performances, because you need resources and you need the knowledge to do all of the correct things. Yeah. So when you returned, how were you able to bring some of that back, some of your learnings back to the States or your travels or your companies here?
So we were doing like a multi-year project that was a co-production with a group that did similar work in the US, which we have like very particular technical elements of our technique in terms of how we share weight and how we change levels. And there was another company in the US called the Carpetbag Brigade, which I also work with now, and they kind of connected and we ended up doing this project that spanned several years because it was complex to bring a large group of people together from two countries. So we sort of cross-pollinated a lot in terms of our vocabulary and the way we did things, and there definitely were some differences and some cultural differences, but we created a show together in 2011 and 2012 in Colombia because it was much easier to bring people from the US to South America than to bring everyone from there to the US. And it was this big thing with the two stilt groups and then musicians from Colombia and poetry and a DJ from the US and video documentation and all this like sort of 17, 20, depending on the moment, person combo doing this project. So there's definitely a lot of cultural exchange there. There were only in that project of the people in the stilt category, there were not many people who spoke both English and Spanish, and I was the only one who was fluent in both languages. So that was interesting. And then like the person who did poetry with us is also bilingual, but he wasn't there all the time. So that was a lot. And like over time, people definitely learned each other's languages. In 2013, that project culminated with a very, very long tour in the US. And so we were all living and working and traveling together. So at a certain point, everyone just knew what everyone was saying, even if they weren't great at the other language.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's like, the experience definitely helps too with the language, and movement is language too, and you're like,
exactly.
It's like it's important to find the verbal language behind what you're doing or experiencing together. So it's cool that kind of blended as well. What would you say, and you can speak to either style, any style still, but what would you say is your best way of finding grounding, like your grounded position or calming position in your stilts?
Do you mean finding balance?
Balance, or just feeling like you are grounded, or...
I don't think this is really answering that question, but I will say something about stilts. You're constantly in a state of being slightly off balance, like you have balance, but unless you're touching a third point, each step, you could think of it as each step is a tiny fall. And it's not that you're giving up and falling down, but you're shifting your weight continuously. And part of finding calm is learning to feel the floor through your foot all the way through the stilt and the stilt bottom, so that you have a sense of where you are, so that you're not continually stepping.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That definitely answered the question. I was meaning from that how do you feel it like through the floor, through the bottom of the stilts? And I think it is cool to know that you aren't always fully balanced unless you have a third point, and also that the kind of balance you have is the sway, maybe, or no? Is it like
it's not so much a sway, and so it's more like you have to use your pelvic floor, and you have to, even though most of us aren't thinking about it that hard, but the other thing is like keeping a micro bend in your knees so that you're not shifting. Like one thing I see a lot, because most people who do stilt walking in the US haven't really trained it, and they do it as like a secondary moneymaker for gigs, and they're just like toddling around on their stilts, and it's a lot on your back because people are kind of like rocking from side to side with their shoulders more as their center of gravity rather than using their pelvis as this point of stability. What I would encourage people to do is to stop doing that, because it looks horrible and it's going to make you feel horrible. But like in our technique, we keep a slight micro bend in our knees pretty much at all times. Like that's where your stability is coming from, is the micro bend in your knees, your stability through your pelvis, and feeling the floor through your stilt.
That's cool. But do you have certain drills that you do or anything that you do to integrate the pelvis into that awareness?
I mean, it's like a lot of it is just pointing it out to people. They have to find it, but I would say like in your warm-ups, like doing an actual warm-up before you put your stilts on, which again, I see a lot of people at gigs who don't do any warm-up before they put their stilts on. And I'm like, damn, your back is going to hurt after this, Like, I want to be warm. I want to warm up my abs. I want to warm up my legs. I want to warm up my hips before I put stilts on, for sure.
Yeah. It's that awareness of like you have to really get into your body before you add another thing to the mix. That can be super dangerous as well.
Yeah.
So you have found pole then through like this want to move differently, right? Express differently in your body. Can you talk about your journey to pole a little bit?
Yeah, I took pole classes because somebody who I was working with actually on stilts had been a pole dancer in the past, and that person was like, you should try pole, you'd be good at it, and like maybe we can make a show together. And we never made the show together, but I did get really into pole dancing. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't look at any of it online. I didn't know there was any pole videos online. I was just like, okay, like whatever vague idea I had from pop culture, I guess. And I was like, okay, well, requires strength and it's sexy, I guess. That would be a good challenge, because in my movement expression at that time, I don't think there was a lot of sensuality. And so I thought that would be a good challenge for me.
Yeah. You seem like someone who goes after challenges.
And so I went and I took classes, and then I was like, wow, this is amazing. I have to keep doing this, and it's so expensive. Oh God. That was kind of what happened at the beginning. But it happened at a time when I was touring with the stilt company, and so and then I was also working with Bread and Puppet Theater in Vermont in the summer, so there would be like large chunks of time when I would go away from pole and come back. Which I think slowed me down a little bit, because I would be really into it, and then I would go and be doing something completely different, and then come back and like kind of have to not start over, but definitely wouldn't be making consistent progress for the first few years.
But it's also nice to have seasons, and at least you were able to still go back to it and enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure. And then I started looking for places when I was on the road to take classes, which was always an interesting experience.
Do you think that pole influenced your stilts performances in any way?
Oh, definitely. Because I would say both influenced each other, because I came into pole with like a pretty strong awareness of my body in space and being comfortable moving through space, not touching the ground, because I'd done a lot of partnering and lifts and things, and a certain amount of strength. Definitely my upper body changed a lot, because you're using different muscles. Like in stilts, when we're doing floor stuff, there's a lot of moving through handstands, not necessarily holding, but there's a lot of stuff coming out of like down dog type positions. Okay. So I have more of like a push than a pull. And so I just like used completely different muscle groups. But then I think because of pull, I became a lot stronger in different ways. And yeah, I think they kind of fed off each other a little bit.
Yeah, it's a nice balance of the push and pull, for sure. Do you think that being on stilts has also helped you with like the ability to be high up in the air and not concerned on a pole or any of those other things?
No, because they're not that tall.
Oh, okay.
They're not super tall. So our stilts are like around like for the technique that I do, they're like between, I think mine are like 2.25 feet. They're like between 2 and 2.5 feet is the ideal length for the technique that we do, given like the proportions of the human body, so that we can get up and down in the different ways that we do. So if you have super tall stilts, you won't be able to reach the floor as easily or get up on your own.
Yeah, because for the listeners, you do like bridges and walkovers and handstands. Like you're doing gymnastics on stilts, so that makes sense that they would have to proportionately kind of fit your body.
Yeah, like you could get away with up to about 3 feet, but then beyond that, it's not really gonna work as easily with the human body. And maybe if I was like 6 feet tall, I could do it, but I'm not.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But okay, so has it helped you in any way with like just the spatial awareness of being up in the air or anything that's like...
Yeah, I would say like general body awareness. Like people are coming into pole from so many different points in their life and in their experience with their body as an artistic medium or their body as an instrument. And I had like a lot of different types of training already, so that was very helpful because like, you know, some people are coming into it and they're not used to thinking about their body parts. They don't know where their body is in space, and that's a lot harder to develop that quickly.
Yeah.
But one thing that I will say, like very specific technical thing that's hard is like from so many years of stilts, my go-to position without realizing it is to have a microbend in my legs. And so that's like really not aesthetically great in pole unless it's a choice. Also for work with heels, really not great. And so I'm more aware of it now, but it's been a struggle sometimes.
Yeah. That makes sense. It's funny because that you say that because I remember too. So I always have at the beginning stages. I definitely had a micro bend often because of my athletic stance in basketball or other sports where you do want to have a micro bend to like
you have to be ready.
Yeah, you gotta react. You gotta be ready. So Anna, who was also on this podcast, she would always be like, okay, straighten your legs now, really extend through your legs. And I took her unstructured class one time and we had to make a restriction. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to not bend my legs and see what happens for a whole song and just see where my body can go. And it was just very interesting, but it is something intentionally that I had to do because innately my body was like, I can be springier with my legs bent, or I was used to it, you know? But yeah, that's funny that you have that intuition as well to bend your legs more often. Have to like remind yourself if that's what you choose to dance with, straight legs. Some other things. Let's get into a little bit about how you just spoke about how the heels were kind of different as well. So I know you do heels a little bit. But you're always trying something new. Can you talk about like your experience in heels with a pole versus stilts a little bit?
Yeah, it's nothing alike. There is nothing in common. People are always saying to me, oh, it's like really high heels. I'm like, no, it's not. I'm wearing like a hiking sneaker on a flat. I guess like the thing that has been helping me, and I really have not gone deep into heels work. I occasionally say that I'm going to devote some time to it, but it's hard to put time into everything.
Yeah.
But the thing that has helped me is that sense of like trying to feel the floor through the shoe. What does not help me in heels is my unconscious safety go-to is to have a micro bend in my knees, and that doesn't work so well all the time in heels.
Yeah.
You really have to, it's like, I would almost, yeah. Yeah, I would almost say it's the opposite.
Yeah.
From my limited experience.
Yeah, I've tried heels class once, and yeah, I learned like to walk straight. You have to like just keep everything nice and straight and on, and it's like, oh, okay, definitely a different feel, and also weight distribution and such and catching. So it definitely, to me, I felt like I was also trying to put more weight into like my arms than I usually would have to. But just to make sure I was like landing in the correct way and not, I'm also not used to wearing heels ever.
Yeah, same. It doesn't make it easier.
No, and you do have an interesting flex toe position in the pole heel, which would be different from your position in the stilt as well, right?
In a stilt, I'm standing completely flat-footed.
Yeah, but the foot is still stuck. Yeah, so that's very different too.
Yeah. All I'm going to say about heels is the more I try, the more respect I have and admiration I have for all of the people who are doing like incredible controlled edge work. And yeah, that's very hard. It takes a lot of practice.
Yeah. Okay, so you spoke a little bit about your pelvis integration into your movement on stilts. I know that you're also a liquid motion teacher and practitioner. So can you talk a little bit about liquid motion and how that has translated into your other movements?
Sure. So before I encountered liquid motion, I did, and I still do, train in contemporary dance. I think in some ways the most challenging thing for me as a student of liquid motion at first was learning this very codified way of doing movements that are very similar to movements I might encounter in contemporary choreography, but just in this other style. And then really taking the time to break down into tiny details what's happening with your anatomy in those movements. And at first, when I started taking liquid motion, it just seemed like we didn't do that much in terms of quantity of choreography in a single class, because coming from a background of taking 2-hour dance classes, you're learning like there's a whole warm-up, there's like a warm-up phrase, then there's another phrase, then maybe you're doing some like technique thing or not, or going across the floor, and then you're learning this other dance phrase at the end if your brain can handle it, which is questionable in my case. But that's a lot of content. And then liquid motion is like a warm-up, and then you learn several different techniques, but it's very, very detailed. And like part of that is because it's about the anatomy, and part of that is because it's making it accessible to people who may not have that dance background.
Yes, that's interesting. And I also feel like everyone's experience after their first liquid motion class is that they're sore in so many different ways than they're usually feeling. I don't know if that was
I don't remember that being sore after liquid motion. I remember being like, this is, and the first liquid motion I took was from Jenny Janiver, and I was like, this is interesting. I like this, but I'm a little confused about why she's going on so much about some things. And then like I kept coming, and I used to go to her class regularly for quite a while. I started to understand the specificity was part of what made it unique.
It's very intricate, very, very intricate. Every little move has a lot of knowledge behind it or awareness.
Yeah. So I think for me, like one thing that's funny for me in liquid motion, like getting like the big moves or like the tricks or whatever, or doing like a fish flop or a shoulder stand or whatever, like I already knew how to do all that stuff because I'd already learned it on stilts. So that wasn't as challenging. Finding the particular way of initiating the movements to give it the quality that's more sensual and the stylized way of doing it, that was a bigger challenge for me.
Yeah.
To sort of learn that dialect of that language, if you will.
Yeah. And have you found different expressions in your body or yourself daily or yearly through that practice?
I definitely think it's always developing, for sure. Yeah. I'm not teaching liquid motion anywhere regularly, so if anyone wants to get me a job teaching liquid motion, I would love one. No, actually, that's why I became a pole instructor, was because I wanted to teach liquid motion, and the studio owner told me that I needed to have more other skills to be able to be hired, and that I should do like pole training, and then it just like because of scheduling worked out that I ended up teaching only pole, and now I teach flexibility training too. But
it's interesting that it is your passion, because I didn't know that about you, is that liquid motion is more of a passion, it seems like.
It's not more, it's just I would love, I think in some ways it can be more accessible to people than pole, or it appears to be, and in other ways it's really good cross training for people who are doing pole, because they're on the floor and they're learning how their body actually moves with just the body on the floor, rather than trying to do these things in the air on a metal tube.
Yeah.
Which is
folding around the metal
tube.
Right.
Right. But like people are trying to do this, but they don't actually have this awareness of when their pelvis is tucking or tilting, for example, or what is happening. Are they using their obliques? What does that even feel like? How much does your head actually weigh? Oh, it weighs a lot. You know,
when you're trying to pick it off the floor slowly.
What is this diagonal rotation of your body that you have to do? And so, like, a lot of that can come from other things too. Like, definitely people who have a background in any other form of dance, especially if it includes floor work, I think have a big advantage when they're coming into pole, just because they understand what these different feelings are in their body, how to engage things. They have certain vocabulary already that's helpful. But liquid motion can give you a lot of that too.
Yeah. I think the ground feedback the ground and the walls are very underused feedback tools in society, and like you can really figure out a lot about your body and how it connects to other pieces by just rolling on the floor or rolling along a wall, and like
well, actually that's something that we do when we do like more intensive workshops in the stilt techniques that I teach with carpet bag, or I would say at this point also with Nimkatekoa, or as an individual. Like a lot of what we do that's unique is partnering, and you have to have an awareness of your weight and your surfaces and how you can pour weight or receive weight. And so the first step is your own self and the floor and the wall. So a lot of our technique comes out of contact improv and that sort of genre of research to find different ways of connecting your body with another body, finding stability, finding lift, finding groundedness, and also finding new shapes and pathways. So I think absolutely the floor, the wall, the air as your partner is fundamental.
Yeah, it's like that feedback that you could get without it being too much feedback sometimes. Sometimes like contact improv can be a lot of stimulation for people if they're not used to doing that. We're in a society nowadays where a lot of our contact is through a device, unfortunately. So it's refeeding that part of your body that might be, just hungry for stimulation, but stimulation from the floor or the wall could be enough to start.
Absolutely. And I think that feeling your body and all of its movement possibilities, being in different orientations, feeling that freedom of expression and exploration that I think being on the floor, doing floor work really gives people, because also they can't see each other as well, so they stop comparing. That can happen in liquid motion, that can happen in other forms too. Like I've definitely experienced that a lot in contact classes or research with the companies I work with, or teaching or taking floor work classes, or just training on my own. But I just think that that's so key for people, and it brings you into another state of mind that is very different than the sort of eyeballs focused perception of the world and judgmental and self-judgmental perception that we go through a lot, because you're looking inwards and going from inside your body out. And it can become expressive, and it is expressive, and it can be performative too. But I actually was watching at the studio, I think last week or the week before, a class of people, and they were, I don't know what particularly they were doing on the floor, but I just saw how focused everybody was. And some people might be feeling awkward, some people might be feeling great, some might be feeling sexy, some might be feeling tired, but they're also intently focused on their body and the sensation and pathways through their body on the floor, that it just made me think, oh my God, everybody needs this so badly. People really need to be doing this. And it brings this other sense of satisfaction and joy, at least to me. And I just thought, if the people who are in power in this world were all rolling on the floor a little bit more, I really think things would be coming out differently. Because you would not be so focused on power and domination of other people. And I'm not talking about like if you're starving to death and you need food, but just this power hungriness or needing more to get things and take things from people and control people. I really think if they were all just rolling around on the floor and dancing more, that things would be different.
Yeah, it's a true joy, and it's a true ability to sit with yourself and roll with yourself and feel all the things that feel good, all the things that don't feel good, and sit with that or try to work with that. It's a humbling experience to be on the floor, too.
But I think it also just, I don't know if this is your experience, but it just, you feel good afterwards.
Yeah.
In this way that other things don't give you.
No, it's like a massage. You're giving your own massage. Like we're sitting on the floor right now. Most people don't even sit on the floor at their own house. They don't know how to do that. So it's just a nice practice to have, to feel out where your bones are sitting, where everything is contacting the floor, and then how the rest of your body is sitting in that space. Beautiful. Thanks for the liquid motion chat. So some other things you had gotten into, you had spoken a little bit about your flex class. I know that you also do flex and you do melt method workshops, correct? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I'm newer as an instructor of both of those things. So the melt method uses soft props, little balls, and foam rollers mostly to rehydrate your fascia or connective tissue in your body to prevent chronic problems. It helps relieve the stress in your body or the aches and pains that just come from our everyday life, or repetitive motions, but all of us do have repetitive motion in our everyday life, even if it's sitting or standing.
Or holding a phone.
Or holding a phone, or pole dancing, riding a bike, whatever. And it's something that I encountered at the dance studio where I was taking classes for years. And I would take this class and kind of feel like, I don't really know what we're doing. We're kind of not doing anything. But then I would feel completely different at the end. Every time I was like, wow, I have a new pelvis. I have new legs. Oh my God. So I would keep going to this class.
Yeah.
Then the pandemic happened, and then there was no more melt class. And I didn't have the roller, so I couldn't even do the things that I remembered at home.
So people also know the roller is like a specific melt roller. It's not your regular foam roller.
It's soft. It's like dense, but also soft. It's a little bit smaller diameter than a lot of foam rollers, and the regular one is 36 inches long, so you can lie the length of it with your spine on it, but because it's soft, it's not going to injure your spine or hurt you.
Yeah.
I mean, you use it on other parts of your body too. But anyway, so then I guess like as a way of continuing to do melt, I took the instructor training online. And then it just took me a while to start teaching, because at that point I wasn't like working at a studio or anything. It wasn't very well planned on my part. And things were still kind of coming out of the whole pandemic situation of people not wanting to be in group classes. So I guess it wasn't really the ideal time for me to do that, but I did. But anyway, lately I've been teaching sort of limited series workshops, which has been nice. And I've done some like private classes or like one-off small group classes type things. But I really love that because it's something that has really helped my body feel better and relieve pain and stop things before they become really serious. Like, in like 2019, 2020, I had this like pretty debilitating problem in my wrists that was actually coming from my shoulder, but it was from pull, and I wasn't like holding the pull properly, and I was pouring a ton of weight through my wrist in a very bad way in bracket grip over and over and over again. And so now I'm like a real stickler about the details of that grip when I'm teaching students. Yeah. But yeah, so melt would have been helpful if I had been doing it to prevent that from getting so serious. I mean, eventually went to physical therapy and all that. But it's something that I love sharing with people because I think it's really useful for everybody. And everybody has aches and pains, and maybe people don't even realize that they have this stuff going on in their body. And then people end up with issues that are just ongoing, that are maybe not terrible and debilitating, but can become almost debilitating. And melt also helps people start to pay attention to their body and sense what they're feeling in their own body.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a theme here.
Exactly. I like this theme. I have tried some melt principles with Rochelle, who also was on this podcast. She very much enjoys it too. And we were having a discussion earlier this morning about the connection of the shoulders and the chest and the wrists and all of that. So I think that it is a cool methodology to definitely have learned. So, although it was in 2020, I think it's a great thing that it's still coming out right now for you, and you're learning so much about your own body and able to translate that to other people.
Yeah.
Which to me, all these certifications and stuff, it's like, how are you able to blend it into what you already do, or help people in your class, like you said, to hopefully prevent or mitigate a chance of worsening the situation. What are some ways in which you use some of your melt method techniques in your classes, or liquid classes, or stilts?
I mean, the tricky thing about melt is it is dependent on the props. But I think just like the overall theme of sensing what your body is feeling. And like in flex class, we're obviously not doing melt. It's a flex class. We're doing other things. But I try to have students compare how they feel at the beginning and the end, like noticing what's going on in their body. I mean, I think that's pretty fundamental to any physical practice, but that is like a key part of the melt method, I guess. You would say that that's sort of similar. But I think like also in the flex classes, I'm not like a contortionist, so I'm not teaching people like really extreme flexibility poses. I feel like my flexibility training classes are more about teaching people how to stretch, because also most of the people who come are just like, oh, I'm not flexible, I need help. They're not like looking to like do a chest stand and then roll onto their feet and like reverse waterfall up.
Yeah.
So I'm like continually telling people how to adjust their body so that they're actually stretching their hamstrings, because everybody's like completely stuck in a tuck all the time because of how they sit, and just giving people awareness of their pelvis and their tailbone. And I was like telling people about their tail so continually in classes for a few weeks. I just kept saying it. I feel like my job is to tell people about their tail and to tell them to squeeze their butt. This is like the top cues that I'm giving. Yeah. So then I started talking about tails, and then the students who are coming to multiple classes with me in a week were laughing because I was like saying all this ridiculous stuff about your tail. But I'm like, you gotta imagine your tail. Like, where is your tail pointing? Are you hiding it? Don't be shy.
Yeah.
These are things I'm actually saying in class.
Yeah.
And like, stick up your tail. What is it? Is it a fluffy tail? Is it a long tail? We want to see it. Like, you know what I mean? Because everybody's tucking their, like, oh, why can't I stretch my hamstring? Because you're not letting yourself. You're stretching your lower back. Why is my back hurt? Because you're never giving it a break. So a lot of what we're doing in flex class is about like isolating muscle groups, especially around the hips, just to allow people to actually stretch or mobilize other parts of their body that are not tucking.
Right.
When it boils down to it, right. Which also is why people have so much trouble sometimes in liquid motion, because people, especially in our society, live in like neutral or tuck when we're not meant to be there all the time, like anatomically speaking. And so people are not aware of the full range of their pelvis and struggling to find that tilt.
Yeah. They're not even aware that they're tucking.
Yeah.
They don't even know that. I worked with seniors for a while, and I used to call it scared dog. That was like the tuck.
Yeah, I
like
say that too.
Dog.
I say shy or sad puppy.
Yeah. And then I would say Donald Duck, and I'd like be like, okay, wiggle, just so that, because for that generation, I was like, these sound like safe words for them that still make them feel comfortable in these positions.
You didn't want to tell them to turn on their ass flashlight? Like,
shine their flashlight at the front of the room. There's certain cueing that is acceptable in pole studios and that is not usually the go-to cueing in other gyms, I think.
Well, I think people do it in like a joking way because it's like supposed to be like a free to be sexy space. So you're like allowed to say the names of body parts that exist and say that most people are saying it in like a joking way too, but it's like it works. I'm like telling my students, because we're in a Strava, I want you to tilt your pelvis and like show your butthole to the back wall. Yeah. And they all figure it out right away. Yeah. Like if I'm working with kids, I'm obviously not going to say that. Yeah, because I will be fired.
And they'll all roll over laughing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I would tell the kids like be a bunny and wag your tail. Yeah. Yeah. You know, you can come up with something different.
Yeah, it's just funny how I think cueing is something that I'm always trying to get better at. And do you have any good cues? Like any nice analogies or like...
I'm sure I'm saying all kinds of crazy nonsense all the time, but it's like I'll find something that makes sense. I'd say a lot of things related to animals.
Okay, cool. What animals?
Well, anything with a tail, I've definitely talked about it. Another one is like when I'm trying to get people to extend without crunching the back of their neck, I have told them to reach their unicorn horn out. Nice. Like imagine your unicorn is reaching its horn. I don't know if that worked. I think it was maybe more distracting than helpful. To me, it made perfect sense.
No, I like that. I've used you're a seal on a beach and you got like and then you find a ball and it's on your nose. Well, there's always new ones out there. Okay, cool. So you have all these practices, you have all these interests in your life. What would you say is something that kind of blends them all together for you?
Oh my God, that's a great question. I do feel like sometimes it feels like things are a little bit fragmented, but there is definitely overlap between all of them in some ways. Like the puppetry world that I come from is also very physical in some senses, just from doing like large scale shows. Often like Bread and Puppet in its like home base has a lot of land, and a lot of the shows are using large areas of land as the stage. Wow. So there might be a lot of carrying giant things around.
Which you've also done in parades.
Yes. And there might be a lot of running. There's just like a lot of carrying stuff around, even to and from. But then a lot of stuff, it might be very simple choreography, but it's like massive group choreography. So there's definitely a physicality there too. And then I think like sort of what I was saying before, it just benefits you to have one practice when you're coming into another practice. Yeah. Whether that's pole or dance or yoga or contact improv or pole dance or whatever it is, ability practices. Yeah.
I think it also can bring this confidence in a way when you're able to blend them a little bit. Like, oh, I already know this, so now I can just add these little pieces or figure out these other pieces to the problem. When you already have an understanding of at least one of the things that you can hang on to. If something's fully new to you, it's just scary. It's like, oh, I've never done this before. But if you can connect it to the other things, it might not seem as scary or threatening or build this confidence in you that allows you to take on the challenges that you're taking on. You seem to take on a lot of challenges. You did speak a little bit about the puppeteer life. Can you also just say, maybe like how heavy some of these items you end up carrying around are, if there's like intricate stuff with your hands that you have to do or body?
So let's see. The style of puppets that I have the most experience using come from Bread and Puppet Theater, and they're not super intricate in terms of like moving parts and joints and articulated things like that. It's a lot of almost like moving sculptures that you're carrying around. But what we consider a puppet could be like a hand puppet that you wear on your hand, or it could be a flat piece of cardboard that's cut out in the shape and painted like something, or it could be a costume that you're wearing with or without a mask, or it could be like group movement, like the group of people is almost the puppet, or it could be giant puppets that have like multiple people to carry the puppet's body, and it has to be carried on wheels, or it could have like a center pole with a large head and a dress, that's carried by different people, and then arms that are made out of fabric, and long hands that are on long poles, and it takes like 6 people. Or it could be like a gigantic piece of black plastic moving over a landscape that might have like a head figure on it that many people are under the plastic.
Wow.
Or it could be like any number of things like that. Could be painted banners that you're carrying. It could be flags that you're carrying and doing a choreography with. So it's like a wide variety of things.
Yeah, it's like so interesting to have the visual, one as the director for all of that, and 2 as a person in that piece, and how you have to see this big picture, but you can't really see it because you're not on the outside, you're just in. That's such an interesting visual to have to sit with and understand.
I think I've been doing it long enough that I have a pretty good idea of what things might look like. I can't imagine what it's like for people who have just come there for the first time and are jumping in, because they must be like, do you want me to do what? Okay. And then they just do it. But, because we work with a lot of volunteers. But there's like a certain vocabulary that tends to repeat. I mean, I have been working there at this point for on and off for more than 2 decades. Actually more than that. But yeah, I have a pretty good sense of the language and what it might say. But it's very visual. And sometimes one of the things we do for that reason when we're working on something is we're asking somebody whether the director is there or not, or you're just working on something to maybe propose. You get another person to look as your outside eye, because you know that you can't see it.
Right.
And you say, okay, wait, does this look good? What about when I do this? What about this? And they'll give you some feedback, because it is hard to tell. Yeah, especially when things are large.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, now it's probably a little bit easier with a phone or a video of what you're doing, but like back 2 decades ago, we didn't always have access to stuff like this. Do you ever use a phone or recording device at all, or no?
So it's interesting you say that. I never recorded myself ever until I started doing pole.
Interesting. Yeah. That's so interesting. I think
because we always worked in a large group.
Yeah.
It's like a large ensemble, so there is always a person there.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So they're the phone. They're the person that's telling you what to do.
Yeah.
And what doesn't.
They're the director for the audience.
Yeah. Right.
So, and it's also like the thing that's kind of hard about using your phone is it takes twice as long, because you have to then do it again with watching it. So you do it once as the dancer, and then you do it a second time as the director. You know what I mean? Like you can kind of speed through your video a little bit, but it's very time consuming to then watch these videos. So it's actually a lot more efficient if you don't record it. And I mean, you can record it if you want, but if you just have a person saying things along as you go, being like, no, that's not working. Or like, I can see your foot, like bring your foot over here. I don't want to see your foot. Or no, it's too fast, or whatever. They're giving you immediate feedback. That is much more efficient and useful in my opinion.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's also like having a coach in a room when you're trying to learn pole tricks.
Exactly.
Have you taken any of that knowledge into your pole practice as an instructor or instructing practice? Anything that you've gotten from other directors?
I'm sure, but pole is so different because it's the first practice that I've done in my life that's solo performance for the most part. And I found that very intimidating at first, because I've always had someone else on stage with me. Like I toured a Stilts show that was about 50 minutes long, and we were all pretty much on stage the entire time, and different people were the focus. Sometimes you might be sort of more on the side, or there were times when we had to stay still for a very long time, but you're on stage. It's not one person who has to create the whole thing and hold the whole thing. And by the same token, pole performances are very short.
Right.
So I remember like the first time that I did a pole performance was at like a student showcase at Body and Pole. And I was so nervous. And like by the time I was ready to start, it was over. Because I was used to being on a show where like you get on stage and it kind of takes 5 minutes to get going. And then you warm up and then you're in the middle of it and you're like really going. Like, 30 minutes in, you're, like it's over. It's been 3 minutes and it's over. Okay, I'm ready to start now.
It's like flash.
Take a bow, So that is really, really different.
Yeah. That's interesting to think about too, is the way that you grasp attention as being different. Because in a show like that, on stilts for a longer period of time, you'd be coming in and out of grasping people's attention. But in building a pole performance, you kind of just gotta hit all the things, and you gotta grasp the attention the whole time for 3 minutes.
Yeah, well, there's nothing else to look at except you. So but the other thing is like you have to warm up the same amount because you're basically coming out, not that your whole thing is just explosive, because that's not interesting to look at, dramatically speaking, either. But you're hitting the crescendo immediately in terms of like what would be part of, I don't know, a 30-minute piece.
Right.
Or a 20-minute piece.
Right.
There's like, it's really condensed because you just can't go on that long.
Yeah, that's hilarious. That's interesting to think about too. And the developing of your own performance and that whole process, it takes a lot of time. I'm sure crafting has like really evolved for you over the years. And we have a couple other questions, if that's okay.
Go for it.
And one of the big questions is this braid in your hair. Is there a significance with this braid that you have, or do you always have one that's either trailing, or I feel like it's very much part of you?
I'm so embarrassed that you're asking me about that. I actually have two right now, which is what I had for a long time, and my hair recently has been too long and I didn't like how it looked. And then I've been doing this hairstyle for like 13 years. And then I started noticing there's like some weird trend that's similar to my hairstyle. And I got very angry about it. And I had to ask a friend where it was coming from because it like popped up. And I'm like, okay, this isn't all people who are like, that's cool, and saw my hair. This had to come from the internet. So this is maybe not relevant to this podcast, but I asked a friend, I'm like, do you know what's going on with this two little braid thing, but it's like different, but why is everyone doing this? They were like, oh yeah, it's this like thing from Japan that's on like Instagram or TikTok or something. I was like, damn it, I'm gonna have to change my hair now because I don't want to look like I'm doing that.
I didn't notice that. I just noticed it as being part of your like signature. I mean, sometimes the braids are down, sometimes they're out, but like she always has at least one braid, one long braid or something in your hair. It's a good signature to have. I don't know. Uniqueness. So what are some of the things that you're currently interested in learning about, whether it's like books or body things or just different cultural things? Is there anything that's like just piquing your interest right now?
All of the above. I love to read. I'm always interested in other cultures. One of the things that makes me learn about other cultures is, aside from just like curiosity in life in New York City, where we are lucky that the world comes to us and shares itself with us. But I also work as a teaching artist in schools, doing art programs and puppetry programs.
Cool.
And a lot of the time the puppetry programs are culturally focused, or it might be something that they're studying in school, or it might be something related to their curriculum. But like, for example, I've done projects that have been focused on specific cultures or countries and like puppetry traditions from those cultures, or I've done stuff that's focused on different legends from different cultures. So I've like looked at like indigenous culture from New York State, or origin legends from China or from India, or looking at puppetry and mask making from around the world, or looking at traditions from like any number of places. So that makes me do a lot of research, and then I start learning a lot of stuff about other cultures. So I actually really appreciate that about that part of my job. And in terms of body, what I would say is, I'm always interested in learning new things, but I guess my biggest quest right now in my life and interest is how to be able to keep moving as much as possible at different phases of life. In the pole world, one thing I've realized, and actually since I still go and take dance classes, I'm like much older than a lot of the people. Especially like, your average weekday morning contemporary dance class in New York. I'm like, oh my God, I could like almost be all of the people's mother in this room. And like maybe the instructor isn't even my age. I'm 41.
Oh, okay.
So
wow, you look amazing for 41.
And then the same thing in pole. I'm like, I have students of all ages, but a lot of them tend to be a little bit younger. Right. And so I'd say both for their longevity And for my longevity, I'm interested in doing things in a way that is healthy for my body and sustainable, because there is a lot of repetition and there is a lot of strain. And, you know, you are going to overwork something. So I think like having practices that are restorative and keep you going, keep you healthy, like melt, like doing flexibility training,
Right.
like doing floor work to balance out the aerial stuff is really important. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at in terms of body. Because I'm always, and it's funny because like I did not expect to be doing this at this point in my life. I had no idea this is what I'd be doing with my life. I wasn't like a super athletic, super physical person when I was a kid. Like, I mean, I like to run around and do stuff and use my body, but
Yeah.
I started a lot of these things when I was a little older than most people. So maybe in some ways that helped because like I don't have crazy injuries from when I was really young. But in other ways, it's like, okay, now is the time when I'm having all of this stuff going on, which is a little unexpected. So those are sort of my areas of interest and curiosity.
Yeah.
And like being inspired by people who are my age or a little older and are dancing or doing pole or doing whatever practice they're doing.
And like, what are their practices that keep them going at those moments too?
Yeah, because it also takes a lot more time to be able to do stuff and recover from it. I'm not talking about injury. Like I need a full warm up. Like if I go and I take a class and we don't do a full warm up, I'm pissed because I'm like, now I'm not ready and I'm going to potentially get injured. Yeah. Like I don't even leave the house without doing a full warm up in the morning. And
that's a great practice.
I got that from Sam Starr.
Yeah. She spoke about that on her podcast as well.
But yeah, like I can't imagine doing anything in my day without doing that first. And like, yeah, I feel like that's really challenging also as a pole instructor. Is like, people are adults and they didn't just come from another dance class for the most part. And they walk in the room and we're asking them to do these like very physically demanding things. Like it requires flexibility. It requires strength. You need to have your abs ready to go. You need to have your shoulders ready to engage. And you need to like pre-engage all of this before you get on the pole. And so I'm just like, everybody's feeling stiff because they were either walking or standing or sitting all day. Like you gotta warm up the legs and the hips. It's like the warm-up is not supposed to be very long, but I just feel like I would never be able to go do what I'm asking them to do if I only did a 15-minute warm-up.
No, I definitely have been in classes where the warm-up was 20 minutes long, and I don't care because I feel warm. I'm happy about it because the longer warm-up is just, you feel better when you get on the pole.
Yes, it's going to go better for you. And then, like, you have to do some cool down, too.
Yeah.
Like, we're all adults. You can't, like, walk off the pole after your intense freestyle and walk out into the winter air. Like, that's not okay. You're not 7. It's not going to work out well. And, like, yeah, okay, lots of people are doing that, but I'm trying.
Yeah.
It's, like, a lot to fit in an hour and 15 minutes.
So much. I'm sure you're doing the best you can. But then, again, people, they can take your suggestions and work with them, or sometimes they won't, and sometimes they'll come back and be like, you were right, you know? So, but I do like that goal. Like, how do you create this? A long-term goal, really, for everything, for all types of movement. In my mind, it's like, the goal should be, how do you do this for a very long time? Or how do you keep sustaining your body and not injuring your body, or just like shortening your life. Movement should be a way to extend or feed your life in a way. So, all right. We will links to everything that you do, whether it's a studio looking for a liquid motion teacher or some schools looking for some puppeteer work. You have a vast knowledge and creativity and artistic ability within you. And so thank you for coming on this podcast and speaking to the many different facets and areas of expertise that you have. If anyone has any questions, they can reach out to us. And thank you so much for being here and taking the time to do this today. This is very insightful.
Thank you so much for inviting me to talk to you.
So if you have one message to say to all the listeners at this moment, they might be moving their bodies in various ways, or rarely, what would you say? What would you pass on?
I think my biggest thing for everybody, you don't have to be a dancer, but just keep moving around in different ways and find something that's joyful for you, whatever that is. Find some way of moving that brings you joy. Like, we didn't talk about this, but I also ride my bike a lot, and it's so important for my mental health, I think. And it also is like a wonderful way to be outside, you know what I mean? Just, it can be anything, but I just hope that all people can find ways where they feel fully in their body in a way that brings them joy.
Thank you for that. So do something that brings you joy today. All right, take care, everybody. Bye.